So it's a real pleasure to welcome Francesca Zambello here. It's a real honor. One of the most important figures in opera around the world. So I'm really grateful that you agreed to speak with me for a few moments today to ask you a few questions.
Happy to be here.
Thank you, thank you. And you've got so much experience from your, artistic leadership, from Washington National Opera to the Glimmerglass Festival to over 50 productions at San Francisco Opera. So I'd like to just, jump right in. I know you don't have a lot of time. So critics have described your productions and praised them for psychologically probing interpretations. Your dark, intense Don Giovanni. You've received praise all over the world, working in all the major opera houses. So my question would be, in your own words, what are some of your most successful productions and what were the reasons for that success?
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I'm happy to be here with you today. I'm wearing my jacket because where I am, there is still a lot of snow and the heating is not working great. So
no.
I don't mean to be like, wear my coat and run. Actually, I'm in Cooperstown, New York, which is where Glimmerglass is located. Some of my most successful productions, well, I've been doing this a long time. So I feel that, sometimes the things that are the big things that sort of make a person's career, sometimes they're your favorite and sometimes they're not. And so in that category, I think for me, my personal favorites would be the Trojans that I directed at the Metropolitan Opera twice, with wonderful casts and just, great experience. I love that work so much. I love Berlioz and I love Virgil, the source material. And then I think Prokofiev's opera, War and Peace, which I directed at the Paris Opera several times. Both of these were filmed. And both are sort of huge epic productions with epic stories and emotions and characters that are so powerful, and music that speaks so much to its time. But then also, I have to say, sometimes very small productions are very dear to me and things that I consider, so important to me personally. And sometimes they may not have been a big success, with the public or with the public and not with the press. I take a lot of pride in having developed a lot of things for younger people. My favorite, or one of my favorites certainly, would be The Little Prince by Rachel Portman and Nicholas Wright, which we have done many, many times. It originated at the Houston Grand Opera, but has been seen in about 20 theaters and has just brought so many young people to music. And is, of course, based on the famous Saint-Exupéry book. So I guess those are sort of like the biggest, and in a way, one of the smaller ones that really mean a lot to me.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that leads to my next question, which is somewhat related. So what are your goals as a stage director? In other words, what needs to happen for there to be a successful production and for there to be enough freedom for all of these artists to come with their own voice?
Right. Well, if we knew what made a successful production, we would all be doing it. I think every production that you do, it's a game of chance. I mean, you can, of course, try to set things up correctly, and I think, for me, whether it's I'm the director or whether I put the team together, if it's a production in a company that I'm assembling the artistic teams, it's really about getting the chemistry right. The right people, the right cast, the right designers, the right conductor. And of course, if it's a new work, that's a whole different discussion because you would have worked on that a lot before. But let's say an existing, a standard repertory opera, you really want to get the right people together. And in the role of artistic director, I think a lot about the balance between people and the chemistry. And then, of course, that's my dog, Rome. Rome, calm down. Um, so it's about getting the right people together from the start. And then, of course, opera is so much a world of chance. A singer gets sick, there's a strike, there's a pandemic. You just don't know. So, but I do think for me as a director, you try to create the right atmosphere in the rehearsal room. You want to have people feel that they can bring the best of themselves. And of course, as a director, you create the world that a production is going to live in with your collaborators and with the conductor, but the singers have to inhabit it. They're the actors, and you have to find the right way to work with each of them and for them to work with each other. And for me, that really is about creating the right atmosphere in the rehearsal room. And then, of course, it's how something translates to the stage. The translation from the rehearsal room to the stage is just incredibly difficult. And I think one of the most delicate things, it's the same way, a conductor will have readings with the orchestra, it goes great, and then the Sitzprobe, disaster. And it's the same thing. Sometimes you translate everything to the stage and it doesn't work, and you're under huge time pressure. So I think, to make something a success, I do think it's about preparation and chemistry. And then it's all about how the pieces go together.
And so to go back on your take, we have such a short time usually, and you've already had so much preparation beforehand, working with your collaborators, the people that designed the set for you and everything. So have you found yourself in situations where in the middle of the rehearsal process, you find yourself having to change many things and react?
Oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. I mean, I think, the nature of the animal is change. A score, like I think the score is the Bible, right? Okay, or the roadmap. Let's not get too religious. But it's what gives us everything, and then it's up to us to be the interpreters. And so sometimes you're completely in the middle of the process and you realize I've made a cataclysmic mistake, or this person is totally miscast, or for a singer, it's awful if they can't sing it, then they can't bring their best. So I think that you as a director should never be afraid to make change. You really should be brave enough to change things and fix things up until a certain point, and then I don't think you should change things. I always think, once you get past like the first orchestra rehearsal, you shouldn't be making a lot of changes, because you will never give the singers and the conductor the stability to take off. So I sort of have a personal thing in my head where I always think by the piano dress, I should be pretty done. And the work that's happening after should be polishing and finessing and nurturing. I mean, it's really important to nurture people at that point, I think. But I do think in the room or in the technical rehearsal process, do not be afraid of change. And that's why you have collaborators. Use your collaborators. Use, your designers and your assistants, and listen to people, because, I always think as a director, we're the buck may stop here, but everybody should bring you something, and you can be the filter.
Now you're talking about collaboration. So in your world, what is an ideal collaborator? And you've worked with so many people, so I know it's a hard question, but if you had to name some names of conductors and singers that have been, typical collaborators of yours that you really enjoyed working with, and why was it such a good relationship of collaboration?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like if I say one person, then I leave out somebody.
I know.
I have to say, I think, I feel that I have been blessed to work with many wonderful people and wonderful collaborators. And again, I think that that's the most important relationship. I think our world is about people. And that's why, of course, now we're all struggling so much, putting all this content up online. If you make music or make theater, it's about live. It's about the chemistry in the room at that moment and the way that it interacts with an audience. And, I pray that we'll come through this. So I know you didn't ask that question. You're asking about specific people, but like I say, I have been blessed with great collaborators from the beginning of my career. And I just think, again, it's a nurturing relationship. I do say a couple of, let's say, amusing things about designers and choreographers and conductors. I always say, if you're choosing them to work with, make sure that you want to have dinner with them a lot, because those are the people who you spend a lot of time with. Because, singers have to protect themselves, and I respect that. They're not going to be going out for dinner, or sometimes, of course, they are, but I mean, in the sense that they really have to take care of themselves. And I always think in the end, they're the people who've got to get up there and do it. We can do a million things in rehearsal, but in the end, they're in that sort of pressure gauge that is so different than directing, because directing is like a slow build, and you're looking at the horizon and figuring everything out. Whereas a singer, they need to have incredible laser focus. So I guess I would just say I've had so many great collaborators, and I just, I think right now I miss so many of them, and miss, process. Process is the most beautiful part of our work. The process of rehearsing, the process of figuring out music and storytelling.
So, and this is related now because you've mentioned the pandemic, and you've mentioned, how we don't know, so many companies and orchestras throughout the country are going to be struggling, and we don't know what's going to happen or when it's going to be reopened. As an artistic director, I'm sure this has been a complete headache, nightmare to you, and having to figure out, what do I cancel, what do I not, how do I foresee what's going to happen? You have so many people involved in this production, so I am sure these are very busy times for you.
This time is certainly the most difficult of my career, because we don't know. I mean, and what if I said something today, tomorrow it will be different. And I mean, that's the thing about this awful situation. And I feel, I've been working in the theater for 40 years and have been through, earthquakes in San Francisco and 9/11 and the stock market crashes and, strikes, and, none of them even obviously hold a candle to this, because of the incredible loss of human life and the ineptness of the United States government presently. And so that has put all of us at an incredible disadvantage. And certainly the arts, as much as we all say we're going to need the arts when we come through it, that's because we're in the arts. I don't know if other people think that way. And it's going to be, how do we justify our existence and convince people of the incredible necessity of what we have to offer to them?
I'll come back with a bit of a happier question for you now.
Sure.
You studied in Russia. Your parents were involved in the acting world. You speak 5 languages. You grew up in the backstage, essentially. How did this personal trajectory take you into the opera world? How did this happen?
Well, my grandmother was a classical pianist, and growing up, I grew up in New York, but then my father was Italian, and we moved to Europe, and we lived in Paris. My mother was an actress, American, and she kept working, but it wasn't really until I got into college that I really thought about opera. I thought about directing from an early age. I loved storytelling and puppets, everything that I think people who want to be storytellers do from an early age. But opera captivated my fantasy starting in college, when I started listening to it and attending it and realizing that it told such big stories and big emotions with amazing characters, and used so many things that I loved in terms of art and music and dance and history and literature And it is, you know, for those who love opera, you know that it is, you know, the total art form. And so for me, it was just getting involved really right after university and going and working as an intern in Germany, and then, you know, getting jobs in production in New York and San Francisco and Chicago, and then back to Europe, and just having great mentors. I was very lucky to have some amazing mentors who helped me and who brought me to the right place. And I do think a career, you know, there's an element of course, hopefully talent and creativity, but there's also an element of luck and being willing to take chances. I mean, you have to be willing to take chances to be an artist.
There was a fantastic interview with you that I read in the New York Times where towards the end, they ask you which kind of questions you would ask somebody. And I love the two questions you asked. And I'm going to ask you one of those, if that's okay. You don't have to answer it.
Okay, yeah.
So what was the best thing you ever did for somebody else?
Oh, okay, I know. I don't, well, I guess I feel like, I feel now, of course, being older, that giving, you know, giving is the best thing that I can do. So however I can give my art is maybe the best thing. That's not very specific, but I do feel like, you know, running Glimmerglass and working as the artistic director in Washington, my huge commitment is to give back to young people and to train the next generations, not just singers, conductors, directors, but, you know, people working in administration. And that for me, I think, I hope, is the best thing that I'm doing now.
And that leads directly to the last question. I'm being mindful of the, you know, the time that I know that you have to go. So what would be your advice to young singers specifically?
Well, I think that young singers, you know, of course, same thing, you know, obviously determination and education and perseverance, but I just think you have, if you are going to be an artist, you have to, you know, be willing to have a lot of sacrifices in life, and to accept that you must give up a part of yourself really to be able to be an artist. And I think that a lot of young people now may not want to work as hard. You know, they've grown up in a generation where their parents were much more successful than their parents' parents, and their parents, of course, have wanted to give them everything. And I think, I'm not saying you need to be a starving artist, but I am saying it's a level of dedication, but also being able to open up yourself and open up your soul. And so much of what we do now is so wrapped up in technology. We're having this interview on Zoom. But I do think getting to your soul and being able to give of yourself is probably one of the more difficult things. And that's what I think makes great, you know, like people say to me, well, why would I want to see La Boheme again? I said, because you're maybe going to see a singer who's going to give you something that nobody else ever gave you. And that's why I think we keep coming back to all these masterpieces. That's why we keep rediscovering things. It's like when people say, oh, opera's going to die. Then I say, well, why are there so many kids studying it? Why are there so many conservatories? Why are there so many young artist programs? Clearly, people want to express themselves through it. So I think it's that thing of the dedication and an ability to be able to bare your soul and not be like everybody else. Don't be afraid to be unique.
That's a wonderful statement to finish with. And I want to be respectful of your time. We agreed to
Oh, I'm so happy to meet you, Maestro Baldini. Thank you very much.
I'm so grateful. And it was a lovely, very insightful interview. Thank you so very much. All the best.
Thank you. God bless you, and take care of yourself.
Thank you.
Be safe. Okay.
Thank you. And you as well.
All right. Take care. All right. Ciao. Bye.